Here we go, answering viewer questions and comments. We start with the big tough guy. That's the handle, which is fun. An unthinkable thought. I need to think harder. In all seriousness, I experience synchronistic telepathy pretty much daily. I cannot fathom how people can be unaware of our connected mind. It takes a willful blindness. This is really interesting. The collective unconscious or collective conscious becomes much more obvious in deeper realization because you see how subtle behaviors, subtle communication patterns trigger certain thought processes and perceptions in consciousness. And so there's this collective way that we interact with one another that is a sort of shared experience. I'm not sure if someone can literally read someone else's thoughts per se, but I would say the experience is more like you take on other people's views, their thought processes, their fears, and so forth through interacting. So we subliminally communicate a lot that we don't overtly say. This is why groups of people can suddenly start feeling a collective fear and act really irrational. Or people can sort of jump into roles in ways that seems surprising in that they didn't pre-plan it. But yeah, this is something that does happen underneath the surface quite a bit. And one of those impressions, one of those, collective hypnotic states is mind identification as such. So we communicate the strategies that we use unknowingly to us or unbeknownst to us to keep ourselves mind identified. And this goes on all the time. It goes on in media, it goes on in conversations. It's really, really common. And it feels so normal to many people that they don't even notice how uncomfortable it actually is. But we're actually using communication, interactions, and certain types of communicative bonding to keep ourselves asleep. We use our ideas of relationship to keep ourselves asleep. We use our ideas of the collective problems of humanity to keep ourselves asleep. It's really fascinating to watch. And so, yeah, this comment kind of speaks to that, in my opinion. Then they said, I don't know what awakening means, though. I've had mystical experiences. I've done the crying. I've been in the presence of God. I cannot escape thought. So the awakening, what that means is realizing everything you said about this sort of empathic, or how do you describe it? Synchronistic telepathy. That whole world is a false world. It's a story that's not happening. Your experience of it, even if it's a collective experience with others, is a sort of hypnotic opioid, right? It's not actually the way it looks. The sense of you and the others that you're in telepathic communication with, that is a false experience. It's an untrue experience. It's not deeply true. Experientially, it's true because that's the nature of experience, is that it's sort of self-justifying as an experience, but it's not what it appears to be. That's what awakening is about, simply. Good question, good comment. Someone said, this felt like listening to a live shadow work session. Melanie just guiding right into it. It's refreshing to have all this humanized a bit from time to time. So I did an interview with Melanie. It was really good. I think we called it nonlinearity interview with Melanie, and she's had an awakening and she's got a lot of clarity. And we go into some really interesting conversations in this interview. So check it out if you haven't seen it. This comes from Pamela. I realized at an ayahuasca retreat that my core beliefs and fears are, I'm not real and I don't matter. I would say the core fears are, it's really good to see that. I mean, those are really at the bottom of all of this. And they're so hidden, they're so repressed that it takes pretty extraordinary circumstances like deep awakening or maybe an ayahuasca ceremony or whatever to really even see that we hold those views and fears, which are dependently originated, essentially. They're dependent on one another. The view that I am and the fear that I'm not, right? Both are illusions, essentially. Death is an illusion, birth is an illusion, right? To solve the problem of birth and death by Zen terminology is to see through all of the illusions that are dependent on one another. That are not just thoughts, though. They're thoughts with a lot of instinctual reaction, instinctual reaction, even to the underlying energetics of being alive, that bring about this sense of being someone and being afraid of not being someone. So to see that really clearly, to uncover all that is requires a lot of work ahead of time. Yeah. So someone who's very mind identified would almost laugh at something like that. They would go, "Oh, that's just some delusion or dream of a hallucination under ayahuasca." No. It's in you too. It's in everybody. It's, if you think you have no fear, you probably haven't even began to touch into the emotion body in a real way, or in a at least certain parts of the emotion body. I think there are people who are pretty emotionally intact and healthy and so forth, but there's a certain septation, there's a certain barrier down below, and they don't go past that barrier. And again, we use the hypnotic collective delusion of individuality, separation, collectivism, all of that, which is based in diluted mental constructs. We use that to not get down to that level, actually, believe it or not. So to see it's great, right? And then she said, "It turns out that's simply true, but not in the way I thought," meaning I'm not real and I don't matter. That's exactly right. It is true, but not in the way you think, not in the way you fear that it's true, because that's looking through that limited lens of the dependently originated concepts of the mind, essentially of consciousness. In natural reality, that's not a problem. It's freedom, really. Gangaji has a really cool video somewhere where she leads somebody down through this into the deep emotion body, to that fundamental fear that I'm unloved, I'm unlovable, and I'm nothing at all. Yeah. Great. Cool comment. Okay, so this is Tracy. When asking why, who, etc. questions, I just find stories that take me nowhere. So in my book, I talk about this, that why questions specifically can really get us up in our head, especially early on. So I don't recommend them because they'll just lead to explanations. They'll lead to more thoughts, thinking, conjecture. Who questions can do it as well. But some people find that where questions, even though they may not seem to fit into this paradigm of self-inquiry at first, are much more valuable. So where questions are like, where am I? Right? So what that means is not like something to think about, but like try to go to it. Where's the experience of you that's the one that's asking why and asking who and getting frustrated and getting nowhere, right? Where is that one though? Go to it precisely. Find it precisely. You'd think you could, right? Like if there's all this frustration and struggle and all, there seems to be someone at the center of that, doesn't there? You would think there is. Go there, find it. And when you can't quite find it and it feels awkward and odd, well, it feels awkward and odd because you're used to using your mind and you can't use your mind for this. But you can look, right? Keep looking. When it gets odd and awkward and funky and your mind goes, this doesn't make any sense, I'm not going anywhere. That's thought, right? Thoughts are always going to tell you you're not going anywhere. They're always going to, try to just get your attention back into thought. Set it aside. Really look, who's the one that's frustrated? And then where is the one that's frustrated? What is it that's frustrated? That's how these questions are used. They're used to look in a very precise way, right? And if frustration comes, that's okay too, right? What is frustration in that setting? Probably a sensation. So where do you feel it? Well, you might feel it down here, like in the body, like here. Does it feel like you're observing that from somewhere? Does the down here seem to be in relation to up here, where you are, where it seems like you are? Great, look for it. Find it. Where are you? If you can precisely find yourself, you should be able to solve all these issues, right? What you are, who you are, all of it. So at least find it first. So where am I? Maybe a really good question for you. Try that and see what happens. And just know, you're going to have emotion come up, frustration, even anger. Things can come up. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong either. The mind will say that means you're doing something wrong, but you're not, right? So keep looking. Look with precision, with genuine curiosity, and try not to strain or struggle, because that just adds unnecessary tension. So relax the body, remain alert, but become curious and look, where am I? And you may find over time that the looking process starts to become different. It may feel awkward at first or confusing or frustrating, but if you keep at it, it may start to feel different, more fluid maybe. There might be more ease there, more wonder, more genuine curiosity. Give it a try and see what happens. Thank you, Tracy. Good question. This comes from Nova Music. I can very much relate to Melanie in regards to awakening and finding your own sound in music making. Only after awakening, I have become capable of trusting my creative intuition fully. And through this trust, I've been able to make music that I truly want to make from my heart. Love it. Beautiful. Yeah, this is all about authenticity. This is about coming into communion with yourself. This is about trusting yourself, trusting your simple, creative, spontaneous impulses, right? And if you're a creative person, which, I mean, we're all creative in some way, but if you're strongly attuned to music or art or something, then you're going to find that this process really opens that for you, because it's just helping you fine tune into, and most importantly, trust your creative impulse, your creative instinct. And from there, you'll start to feel this opening, these conduits opening, and your expression will come through, your creative expression will come through more and more clearly. So good. Another way of saying that, do the emotion work, right? An artist that has done deep, deep emotion work is going to be an artist that can transmit very clearly. This is from Tozvarsan. Not sure. It is funny sometimes lately when Angela talks about awakening, it triggers a sort of rage and disgust in me. Those are great emotions, rage and disgust. How often do we let ourselves feel those? Rage and disgust. I should also say, it's really good that you acknowledge it, right? It's good that you just notice it, because I think some people sidestep this stuff. Like they hear about it and then they kind of talk themselves out of awakening even being a possibility. And then they kind of intellectualize it, but they're not really willing to really drop down into those intense emotions, maybe. So feel it, like realize, yeah, when you start pushing on the boundaries of your identity, right? It doesn't have to do with Angelo. It has to do with you and your own investigation of yourself. What's true for you, what seems to be true for you, and seeing if it actually is, right? When we start doing that, we start really challenging our accepted identity, I suppose. Of course, there's going to be alarms going off inside. There's a part of us that actually believes that, really holds on to that identity. And so when that's challenged, you're going to feel the barrier emotions, anger, maybe disgust, fear. These things are going to come up, and it's totally okay. They'll come up, they'll say what they need to say, and they'll say it in sensation, and then they'll settle. And they may come again, and then they'll settle. It's okay. You can handle it, right? You can handle it by just reminding yourself you don't have to do anything about it. Just feel it. It's okay. It'll move through. Yeah. And then they said something to look there for sure. Good. Yeah, that's a mature approach. Is like, yeah, I'm feeling this. It's something's there. It's good. That's a good place to orient, not run from and go, Angela, you're full of crap. This is all nonsense. I enjoyed this interview so much, so relatable, even without understanding. They're talking about the Melanie interview. A lot of people really loved the Melanie interview. Melanie's pretty lovable, so. Okay, this is from Roland. I am a structure built of symbols. I like it. A vessel for ideas unseen. I like it. I shape your thoughts and your world, but I am born from what lies within. What am I? And underneath it says language. Love it. That's good. Really good. Yeah. What a fun thing to investigate, the nature of language, the effect it has on our experience of self, of aliveness, of being here, being a person, being in the world. How language and that self-languaging interfaces with emotion or even avoids emotion. It's very interesting to take that approach. Cool. This comes from Joe Reed. I'm delighted you're addressing this. Okay, let me look and see what I'm addressing here. Not really sure. Sometimes I have to move this thing around the screen to see what we're talking about. Okay. The video is, I've been trying for 10 years and no awakening. That video did really well. People seem to really enjoy that. Okay. And he said, I'm delighted you're addressing this video as it describes my situation well. I can tick the boxes for the recommendations you suggest. How can I determine whether I've awoken already? I have videos on this and I have a book about it too. I certainly had more than glimpses, but may be looking for something based on what I've heard or read about awakening. Unfortunately, a lot of things you may have read or heard out there can just be confusing. There are people who are very clear, but there are many people who aren't, or they just say confusing things. Even to me, I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about, right? So yeah, if you read a bunch of stuff and you're like, oh, is it this? Is it that? I'm comparing myself to this dude and that person and what they said. That's just a confusing way to go about it, right? I might just say this. Has there been something that has changed about your identity? Truly. And it may have been in one of these, shifts, one of these experiences you're describing, one of these moments. Often it's like something different comes out the other side, truly. Vastly more space is opened up after something shifts. And it's often in contrast to experiences. People who have a shift in identity often will know, yeah, this wasn't an experience. Like there were experiences before that kind of were a version of it, but they were encapsulated by an identity. This was a change in the identity that tries to encapsulate experience. Yeah. So that's one way of saying it. But I do have a lot of videos and material on this, and my book goes deeply into it. If you're really curious and you think you may have had that, talk to like a non-dual facilitator and see what they think. Just run it by them. Run it by a Zen teacher. Or don't worry about it. You don't necessarily need to know with thoughts, did I have an awakening or didn't I have an awakening? Just keep orienting to what's here. Whatever comes up now, here, right? Questioning like, okay, well, what is coming up here? Well, I don't find a self. That's obvious, right? If that's really obvious to you experientially, not because you learned it from watching videos, you probably had a shift, right? If it's just really obvious. Okay, well, whatever's here, there's not a self here. There's nothing local. This is just the experience I'm describing, right? So there's no center, some sensations, sound, no boundary between sound and sensation, such that without a description, essentially, there's not really anything specific or formed as such, right? So that kind of thing, like just what's in your experience, what's coming here? What's coming here to be seen, felt, investigated? Maybe it's something that's much more conceptual, like a vasana, something sticky, something about that needs to be addressed, wants to be addressed, a certain thought, a belief, a fear, a doubt, like whatever is appearing in your experience, just that's what to address. And to me, that's all that matters. I don't really care if you had an awakening or not, honestly. I know it will happen if you investigate authentically. It always happens. If you're willing to let go of old beliefs, old ideas, old ways of perceiving yourself. If you're willing to go into a deep, deep authenticity with yourself or with anyone else who's clear, it will happen. So I don't worry too much about it, right? So if you're up in your mind going, is it or isn't it? It doesn't really matter that much, to be honest. What does matter is deep authenticity, being honest with yourself about what's actually occurring now, what's being experienced, what you're being called to feel. And maybe in the emotion spectrum, there's going to be a lot of that coming through, right? For anyone moving through this process. If that's what you're called to address, then address it. Don't run from it. Don't spiritualize it and go, oh, there's no one to do that. That's a mistake. Like, oh, there's no one to do that. So if I try to do some emotion work, that's just seeking. I'm not going to do that. There's no one to do that. Don't do that to yourself. You'll stay in that kind of a partially awake state and bypass and not really know the living truth of non-dual realization, which is kind of awesome. Good question. Okay. Someone said, awakening is not always the mystical experience people assume it to be. I would agree. It's not an experience. It is merely the act of allowing yourself to utilize certain abilities you've always had in order to become aware of your reality. Maybe. And the crushing obstacles that threaten that reality. Fix the problem or perish. It is a natural evolution, testing your abilities to conquer self-induced suffering. It's kind of a shit deal sometimes, but it is what it is. Yeah, I'm not sure. My sense is the person who wrote this isn't talking about awakening the way I am, but they could be. But I like the fire behind that. The willingness to address something, it's important. Okay. Someone said the term is homophone. Homophone. I was talking to Melanie and we were talking about words, two words that sound the same, but have different spellings and meanings. And someone said it's a homophone. I like doing videos because I can mispronounce things and people will correct me, so I learn. Or I use a word wrong and I learn from it. Or I just say, gosh, I don't know what that is. And someone says, this is what that is. So thank you, Mayan embodiment. Okay, this is from Yvonne. So much resonance. This is the Melanie video again. I appreciate that you spoke about childhood awakening, as I totally relate to what both of you shared. I remember how as a child I would not get what everyone is doing here, and that everyone seemed to be really believe that any of this is true. Like, right? It's crazy. Like, I remember this so much as a kid, but I almost remembered learning to bury it. I mean, I think I did. I learned to bury that. It's like, no, that freaks people out to like talk about that kind of thing. Or like, I could just sense it. Like, no, you're supposed to pretend you believe this, right? I never believed it, but you're supposed to pretend you believe this illusion of what we're doing, and believe that we're okay, that we feel okay. I didn't feel okay, but I learned to believe that I should act like I feel okay. So many layers of inauthenticity. Maybe I'm the only inauthentic one out there, but I sense it in a lot of people. I'm not anymore, but I used to be inauthentic because I just learned that, like, oh, just pretend everything's okay. Why? Why would you do that? Don't do it. But you have to also learn not to overcompensate and pretend everything's not okay. Don't just take the other extreme and constantly complain, because you'll convince yourself of something else, right? Just investigate. Who is it that's suffering? Right? Who is it that's experiencing all this? All the assumptions we take to be true when we start to tell ourselves lies and tell everyone else lies. Question those assumptions and it'll all clarify. You don't have to worry about what's true and what's not true. Just get to the bottom of the identity issue, solve the problem of birth and death, and then life changes. It's not different than anything because there's nothing to compare it to, but certainly the suffering can end. So there you go. Okay, someone said, Angelo, is it normal to experience fear at the idea of some of the fetters dropping away and experiencing these perceptual shifts? I might even say fetters, yes, and any other shifts in identity. There's always fear, of course. Well, not always, but it's common. It's common because you're questioning more and more subtle belief structures that seem and feel like real truths, like a physical you, a physical universe, a physical world, like all these things that we hold to be so true. When you start to question them, of course, you're entering the unknown. And of course, there's going to be some fear with that. Now, you're not entering some place called the void or something that is like the way the mind fears that it's going to be beyond that unknown. It's just that you're entering the unknown to the mind. And that's always unsettling to the mind. You're not entering or exiting anything. You're just letting those layers of delusion drop away, and what is will be revealed, and it will be okay. You'll be more than okay with it. Let me say that. Cool. Someone said, I know there's nothing to be afraid of, but my mind says it's afraid of the LSD-like sense experience. It feels like the fear is redirection, just a fear of letting go. The fear isn't redirecting, the thought about the fear is. The belief that the fear is redirecting you will redirect you, or just the tendency to redirect into thought when fear comes. Instead, just feel the fear. Go right down through the bottom of it. Just let the fear be here. Let it fill up the body. Just stay with it, feel it, move with it if you need to. Just feel it. Won't last forever. Great question. Okay, that's it for now. We'll do more later.